All right, if you've ever found yourself in a tech meeting, you've definitely heard this acronym thrown around. API. It gets used constantly, but what does it actually mean? Well, in the next few minutes, we're going to break it down.
You know the feeling, right? You're in a meeting, someone says something like, "Oh, we'll just hit their API." And you just kind of nod along, hoping, praying nobody calls on you to explain what that is. Trust me, we've all been there. It sounds super complex, but the idea behind it is actually surprisingly simple.
So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on this thing for good. We're going to talk about what an API actually is, why it's become one of the most crucial concepts in all of technology, and we'll show you how it's kind of secretly running your entire digital life.
And you know what? The best way to get your head around this tech concept, it has absolutely nothing to do with code. Nope. It all starts in a restaurant. In this simple analogy, it's the key to unlocking everything else.
Okay, but before we get to dinner, let's get the official definition out of the way. API stands for Application Programming Interface. Now, the key word here, the one I really want you to focus on, is interface. Don't think of it as a piece of software. Think of it more like a contract or a set of rules that lets two completely different applications talk to each other using a simple system of requests and responses.
All right, let's make this real. Imagine this. Your dinner reservation is for 3 people. But, it suddenly needs to be for 6. Your friends decided to join at the very last minute. So how do you make that happen?
Well, you've basically got 2 ways you can handle this. One way is super easy, clean, and simple. It uses a helpful go-between. The other? Oh, that's the hard way. It's messy, it's complicated, and you're forced to figure out the whole thing by yourself. So, the easy way? It's what we all do, right? You just pick up the phone, you call the restaurant. You make a very specific request to the person on the other end. Hey, can I change my reservation from 3 people to 6? And in return, you get a simple, clear response. Yep, we can do that. Or, sorry, we're totally booked. It's clean, it's efficient, and it's simple.
Okay, now let's flip that. Imagine there is no helpful representative. This is the hard way. For you to figure out if the restaurant can handle 6 people, you'd need to get into their internal systems. You'd have to check the kitchen's capacity. You'd have to look at every single other reservation for that night. You'd need to know the waitstaff schedule. I mean, it's not just a ton of unnecessary work for you. It would also mean the restaurant has to expose all of its private, sensitive data. It's a total mess. It's inefficient. And honestly, it's a security nightmare.
And right there, that's the big aha moment. In this whole analogy, that customer service representative is the API. It's the public-facing interface that lets you communicate with the restaurant's complex inner workings without you ever needing to know or see any of the messy details.
Okay, so our API is the go-between, the restaurant rep. Now, let's take that exact same idea out of the restaurant and apply it to something you probably use every single day, the weather app on your phone. I mean, really think about it for a second. When you pop open the weather app on your phone, how does it instantly know the temperature, the wind speed, and the 10-day forecast for your exact location? So, how's that possible? Did Apple go out and build its own global network with thousands of its own weather stations? Yeah, probably not. That would be insanely expensive, and besides, collecting weather data isn't really their main business. Now, the real story is way, way smarter. A specialized service, somebody like weather.com, has already done all of that hard work. They're the experts. They collect all this global weather data. And here's the kicker. They build an API so that other apps, like Apple's, can tap into that data, but in a totally controlled and organized way.
And boom, there it is. This shows you the whole thing perfectly. Apple's weather app sends a request over to the weather.com API. That API then handles the request, grabs the correct data from its own complicated systems, and sends a response right back to the Apple app. Then, that information just shows up all nice and neat on your screen. The API is that essential bridge.
Okay, so we've established that the API is like this bridge. But how does the traffic, the information itself, actually move across that bridge? Let's take a quick look at the simple mechanics of how this communication really happens.
You know, this whole back and forth conversation, this request and response thing, it has a name. It's called an API call. It's just that single cycle of one request going out and one response coming back.
And for most of the APIs you'll find on the web, this call is like a simple 3-step dance. First up, the request. Your app asks a server for some data. Step 2 is the action. The server gets that request and processes it. And finally, step 3 is the response. The server sends the data you wanted right back. Request, action, response. That's the whole cycle.
And speaking of responses,
I can pretty much guarantee you have seen one very, very common API response thousands of times in your life, even if you didn't know what you were looking at. This one right here.
Yeah, that 404 not found error? It's not just some random oops broken page message. It is a formal API response. Your browser made a request for a web page. The server took action, but couldn't find it, so its API sent back the response status code 404, which is just a fancy way of saying, hey, the thing you asked for, it's not here. It's a perfect real-world example of an API response.
So you've got these little request and response cycles happening millions, probably billions of times every single second all across the internet. But what happens when you zoom out from all that? What's the big picture here?
Well, to put it simply, APIs are kind of like the digital glue of the internet. They are the invisible force that holds our modern digital world together, allowing thousands and thousands of separate applications to connect with each other and seamlessly share data. And because they're this invisible glue, they are literally powering almost everything you do online. That time you logged into a new site with your Google account instead of making another password, that was an API. When you go to a travel site and it shows you flights from 10 different airlines all on one page, that's a whole bunch of APIs working together. Using a map inside your ride-sharing app or paying for something online with PayPal, yep, all powered by APIs.
So the big takeaway from all of this is that APIs aren't just some obscure detail for programmers. They are the fundamental building blocks of our connected world, which really leaves you with a final, kind of mind-blowing thought. If all the APIs on the internet just switched off tomorrow, how many of the apps on your phone would actually do anything at all?